corporation blocked his water source. He caught rain in clay pots and supplied 6 farms. The letter arrived on September 3, 1971. 1 page. Typed, it came from the Harmon Basin Water Company out of Chattanooga, printed on gray letterhead, and signed by a man named Gerald Fitch, Senior Resource Manager. It informed Cyrus Mead that as of November 1st, the company would be exercising its upstream diversion rights on Cane Branch Creek. Per their 1948 mineral rights acquisition, the creek that ran along the eastern edge of his 44 acres in Bledsoe County, Tennessee, had been included in that transfer. Cyrus read it twice, standing at the kitchen counter with the September heat still coming through the screen door. He smelled the faint diesel on his own hands from a repair he'd done on the pump that morning. He folded the letter back along its creases, set it on the table, went outside. He was 58. Had been on this land since 1939, first alongside his father, then alone after 1952. The creek had been running cold and clear along the eastern edge of the property longer than the deed said he owned it. It came off a spring on the hillside above, fed into Cane Branch, which wound south through 4 neighboring farms before meeting the larger creek at the county road. That spring was what mattered, not just to Cyrus. The 5 farms below his property on that same watershed had relied on it for years. Raymond Polk, who ran a mixed operation on 38 acres just south of the property line. The Atchley brothers, Harold and James, who farmed adjacent parcels east of Polk. Margaret Sutton, 67 years old, 22 acres, a kitchen garden and 40 laying hens. And Alton Webb at the county road turnoff, who ran cattle on 80 acres and had never drilled a well. None of them had received a letter. They didn't hold the mineral rights. Cyrus did. He drove to each of them in the first week of September, taking the county road in the '64 Ford pickup with a cracked passenger window and 91,000 miles on the odometer. He didn't speculate, didn't make promises he hadn't earned yet, just told them what the letter said. That by November 1st, the company would redirect Cane Branch upstream at the diversion point. That the spring-fed portion of the creek would go dry. That he didn't know what could be done about it. Raymond Polk said the county water authority had programs for this kind of thing. There were no programs. Polk hired a lawyer in Pikeville the second week of September. The lawyer reviewed the 1948 mineral rights transfer document. Cyrus had a copy in the filing cabinet and found it complete and legal. The mineral rights, including subsurface water access and upstream surface control, had been sold by Cyrus's father for $310 in 1948 to the Harmon Basin Mineral Company, which had been absorbed by the water company in 1961. The lawyer told Polk they had no basis for injunction. Charged $180 for the review. Polk didn't get the $180 back. The county extension office sent a man named Doyle Hicks out to the Mead farm on October 6th. Hicks was 34, had a degree from the University of Tennessee, and had been with the Extension Service since 1964. He walked the creek bed, measured the spring's output with a metal gauge from the bed of his truck, made notes on a clipboard, walked the full eastern property line and stood for a while looking at the hillside where the spring came out between 2 limestone outcroppings. He told Cyrus the math didn't work. That water loss of that magnitude couldn't be offset by surface collection. Not in Bledsoe County. Too many dry months between June and August. He could try a cistern. But a cistern large enough to supply that property would run $1,800 installed. Maybe more depending on the subsoil. Hicks left his card on the porch railing, said to call with questions. The second letter from Harmon Basin arrived October 14th. Same gray letterhead. Same signature from Gerald Fitch. It confirmed the diversion work would begin October 25th and be complete before November 1st. A map was enclosed, a dotted red line showing where the channel would reroute the water east, away from Cane Branch, into a concrete reservoir the company had built on the far side of Walden's Ridge. Cyrus folded the map and put it in the kitchen drawer, next to the first letter, next to the deed, next to his father's discharge papers from 1919. He had 11 days. Alton Webb drove over on October 18th. Said he was thinking about selling the cattle and moving to Dayton where his wife had people. Said he couldn't drill into that rock without spending $2,400 he didn't have. Said it like a man who had already made up his mind. Cyrus listened, didn't argue. After Webb left, Cyrus sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and worked the numbers until past 10. He had $347 in the account at Bledsoe County Savings. Corn had come in at $1.12 a bushel, down 3 cents from the season before. He'd sold 2 steers in August, cleared $480, and put most of it toward the propane contract and a truck tire. $1,800 wasn't a number he could reach, not in 11 days, not in 110. But he had been thinking about clay. His father had kept crocks, 8 of them, glazed, thick-walled, dark brown, still in the root cellar, 10 gallons each, used for water storage in August when the creek dropped low. His father had also mentioned something else once. Cyrus had been 12, maybe 13. His father had worked in northern Chihuahua for 5 months in 1929 before the land pulled him home. Had seen farmers there burying unglazed clay pots beside their rows. The walls wept moisture slowly into the root zone, kept plants alive through dry weeks without wasting a drop. That had been distribution. What Cyrus needed was collection. He drove to the Bledsoe County Library in Pikeville on October 19th. Monday morning, overcast, the road wet from the night before. The library had one reference volume that touched the subject. Published in 1953 by the New Mexico College of Agriculture, 9 pages on clay and surface water collection. He read them twice and filled 6 pages of the legal pad. The county averaged 51 inches of rainfall per year, not evenly. January through April ran heavy. June through August ran light, sometimes critically so. October was variable. November tended wetter than memory suggested. He checked the rainfall records posted in the back of the same book for comparable Tennessee counties. The numbers weren't far off. 53 inches for a county just north of Bledsoe in 1961, 48 inches in 1965. He wrote down the low year and the high year and the mean. Then he calculated how many square feet of roof surface, at 90% collection efficiency, would be needed to capture 1,130 gallons across an average October through May rainy season. The number was 4,800 square feet. He didn't have that, not on his property alone, but across 6 farms, with the right positioning, he might come close. Roy Dunover ran a pottery operation on Grassy Creek Road, 4 miles east. He was 69 and had been working local clay since the 1930s. Dishes, planters, decorative pieces he sold at craft shows in Crossville and Dayton. He had a wood-fired kiln behind the shop, large enough for 30 to 40 pieces at a run, and he had worked the same vein of gray-brown creek clay for 40 years. Cyrus drove out there on October 21st. He explained what he needed: not glazed, not decorative. Thick-walled, unglazed vessels, 6 to 10 gallon capacity, the kind that would allow a small amount of moisture exchange through the walls, slowing evaporation from the inside. The kind that, positioned correctly beneath a roof drip line, would catch and hold rainfall with minimal loss. Dunover had never made anything for that purpose. Said he could try. They worked out a price: $4.50 per pot under 8 gallons, $6.50 for anything larger. Cyrus ordered 32 pots in mixed sizes. Total, $156. He paid half that morning, $78 from the account, and arranged 2 pickups, the first on November 4th, the second on November 15th. The diversion crew arrived at the Cane Branch Junction on October 26th, Caterpillar D6 dozer and 2 smaller machines. Harold and James Atchley drove out and watched from the county road, stood in the cold for 2 hours. The crew didn't acknowledge them. The concrete forms for the diversion basin went in by October 29th. Cane Branch ran normal on October 31st. By November 5th, it was a trickle. By November 10th, it was dry rock and silt. The smell of the empty creek bed, cold mud and exposed limestone, carried as far as the barn on still mornings. The first batch of pots from Dunover's kiln arrived November 4th. 16 of them, still faintly warm from the second firing. Rough textured on the outside, the color of the creek clay they came from. Cyrus carried them one at a time from the truck bed to the base of the north barn wall. He had spent 3 evenings the previous week mapping the property's rainfall patterns. Used a flat sheet of galvanized metal, 4 feet by 4 feet, and a collection pan. Set it in 5 positions across 2 rain events in late October. Measured what accumulated at each position. The north face of the barn roof was the best. A 7-foot overhang at the east end, 34-degree pitch, standing seam tin. Per 100 square feet of collection surface per inch of rainfall, 54 gallons. The overhang covered roughly 180 feet of catchment. He dug a shallow trench below the drip line, 6 inches deep, lined it with creek gravel, and set the first 9 pots into it, slightly angled, rims below the eave. Connected them in series with short clay pipe sections from Dunover. Sealed with a slurry of wet clay and fine creek sand, he mixed himself and pressed into each joint by hand. The last pot in the line drained into a 55-gallon wooden barrel he'd hauled from the Pikeville feed mill for $8. November 12th brought the first real rain after the setup. 1.2 inches. He collected 61 gallons, not from the creek, from the sky. He said nothing about it to anyone for 2 weeks. He was still testing. The barrel leaked at the south face seam. He repaired it with roof tar and baling wire. The clay pipe connection between pot 7 and pot 8 cracked in the first hard frost. He replaced it with a section of ceramic drain pipe from the back of the tool shed, unused since 1962. He reseated the joint with a thicker slurry mix, waited 2 days for it to cure. Ran his thumb along the seal. It held. November 20th brought another event. Half an inch, fast, he stood in the barn doorway and watched the eave drip into the first pot. The clay collected the water along the rim's inner curve and funneled it down. The sound was distinct, a thin, hollow tapping of water on fired clay. Steady, each pot in the line picking up the flow from the one before it. He counted. 9 pots working in sequence, 1 salvaged barrel at the end, 55 gallons capacity, starting to fill. He walked the line and checked every joint. Nothing leaked. November produced 3 more rain events. Total rainfall for the month, 3.9 inches. He collected 201 gallons from the barn eave system alone, not 1,130. But this was one barn, 12 pots, a salvaged barrel. His neighbors' barns were bigger. He drove to Raymond Polk's place on November 28th. Polk had a hay barn 64 feet across, metal roof, facing north, sitting on the upper edge of a natural depression in the pasture that already pooled standing water after rain. He also had a machine shed on the east side, standing seam metal roof in better condition than Cyrus's barn. The surface area roughly 3 times the collection setup Cyrus had built. Metal collected more efficiently than wood shingles. Loss rate was lower. Per square foot, per inch of rain, a standing seam roof in good condition lost maybe 8% to absorption and run direction. Cyrus had measured that himself with the sheet metal test. He sat at Polk's kitchen table with the legal pad and walked through the numbers. The 61-gallon collection from 1.2 inches of rain. The projected yield from Polk's 2 roofs given the November through March rainfall average. The cost of the pots, the barrel, the concrete materials for a cistern, smaller and cheaper than Doyle Hicks had quoted. Polk didn't say anything for a while. Then, he said he had $95 he could put toward materials. That was where it started. By December 14th, 3 properties had collection systems in place. Cyrus's, Polk's, and Harold Atchley's. James Atchley came in the first week of January, working with his brother and using pots from Dunover's second firing. Margaret Sutton was added January 10th. Her chicken coop had a north-facing roof line and enough eave length for 7 pots in series. Alton Webb, who had not sold his cattle and had not moved to Dayton, drove out January 18th and asked what he'd need to get started. 6 farms, 13 collection sites, 47 pots from Dunover's kiln, 4 salvaged barrels, 2 poured concrete cisterns, smaller and cheaper than any contractor would have built, put together by Cyrus and Polk over 4 weekends in December and January using creek aggregate, rented wood forms, and a mix ratio out of a 1946 masonry reference Cyrus had found at the library. The cisterns were not $1,800 each. Combined material cost for both, $186. December rainfall, 3.7 inches. Combined collection across all 6 properties, 604 gallons. January, 5.1 inches. Combined, 861 gallons. February, 4.8 inches. Combined, 812 gallons. Not all of it was kitchen safe without treatment. What came off wood shingles, they boiled. What came off metal roofing, they settled for 48 hours in covered barrels, then filtered through doubled burlap. The wells on several properties still had some yield, just inconsistent. The clay system supplemented it. By March, the numbers were holding. Polk's livestock were drawing from the barn cistern exclusively. Harold Atchley had run a line from the concrete cistern to the kitchen tap. Margaret Sutton had not bought water from the Pikeville store in 8 weeks. Alton Webb had not moved his family anywhere. The test came in June of 1972. Bledsoe County averaged 3.6 inches of rainfall in June. June 1972 produced 1.1 inches. One measurable rain event, the 11th. Nothing else until a passing shower on the 29th that registered 0.3 inches. 11 farms in the eastern part of the county ran critically low. 3 families hauled water from Pikeville in 5-gallon cans at 65 cents each. One family lost a portion of their cattle by mid-July from dehydration compounded by heat. The 6 farms on the collection system held. Going into June, the combined cistern storage across all 6 properties stood at 2,340 gallons. The June 11th event added 198 gallons. Used carefully, livestock and kitchen first, garden irrigation suspended except for young seedlings. The 6 farms drew down the reserves without running dry. The Atchley brothers did not haul a single can from Pikeville. Margaret Sutton's kitchen garden produced through July. Alton Webb's cattle lost 4 pounds average from reduced water rations across 3 weeks. Not 0. 4 pounds. When the summer rains normalized in August, the weight came back. The cisterns refilled by September. The system had gone through its first full year. 1 dry season, tested. It held. 2 farmers from the far end of the county road came by Cyrus's property in early August. Said they'd heard something at the feed store in Pikeville. Said they'd had a dry June too and wanted to know if what they'd heard was accurate. Cyrus walked them out to the barn eave, showed them the pots in the trench, the clay pipeline, the barrel, the cistern sunk into the ground nearby, answered every question, gave them Dunover's name and address on Grassy Creek Road. Both of them ordered pots before September was out. Doyle Hicks from the Extension Office drove out on September 8, 1972. Sayed the county agent had mentioned something, that someone in Bledsoe County had done a clay collection system, that it had appeared in a district summary. He asked if he could see it. Cyrus walked him through the barn setup. Same pots, a year darker now, the joints settled and dry, the gray clay slurry cured hard. The ceramic drainpipe section still seated tight in position 7. The second cistern Cyrus and Polk had poured in January, flush with the ground, cover boards weathered to the same gray as the barn's siding. Hicks knelt down and looked at the joint line between pot 3 and pot 4 for a long time without saying anything. Hicks took 14 pages of notes. Asked about Dunover's pots, the wall thickness, the collection rate calculations, the cost breakdown, the water treatment protocol. Cyrus answered every question. Did not mention the $1.800 cistern estimate Hicks had quoted in October of the year before. Didn't need to. Total cost of the Mead Farm setup by September 1972, $227. That included Dunover's pots, the barrel, the concrete materials, the ceramic pipe sections, and miscellaneous hardware from the farm supply on Walnut Street in Pikeville. 227s against the $1,800 Hicks had estimated for a single property installation. Hicks's notes went to the District Agricultural Office in Knoxville in November. A summary went to the Tennessee Valley Authority Rural Resources Division the following spring. No program was published. No extension bulletin printed, but 4 adjacent counties received an inquiry letter from the district office asking whether similar water disruptions existed and whether any informal mitigation had been attempted. 3 of the 4 wrote back. They had disruptions. No mitigation. Gerald Fitch of the Harmon Basin Water Company mailed a form letter to 6 properties in the Cane Branch watershed in March of 1973. Offered to purchase land at assessed value plus 11%. The letter listed Cyrus Mead as the first address. Offer valid for 45 days. Cyrus put it in the kitchen drawer with the others, next to the map with a dotted red line, next to the deed and the discharge papers from 1919. The offer expired. Roy Dunover had orders from 3 adjacent counties by 1974. Not all of them for rainwater collection vessels. Some were for garden oleus, the buried distribution pots Cyrus had described from his father's Chihuahua story. Dunover had worked out the shape on his own, made 80 the first season. Sold them at a craft show in Dayton, and a farm supply store in Crossville put in a standing order for 40 per year. Dunover never advertised, never had a sign on the Grassy Creek Road property beyond the one that said pottery. Word of mouth carried it. Farmers told other farmers. A man in Rhea County ordered 24 pots in 1973. A man in Cumberland County ordered 18 in the spring of 1974. Dunover fired an extra kiln run in October of that year to keep up. Raymond Polk sold his farm in 1981 to his son-in-law. The collection system stayed. The son-in-law added a 3rd cistern on the east side of the property and connected the machine shed roof into the line. When Polk visited in the mid-1980s, the original 1971 pots were still seated in the trench along the barn eave. The clay pipe joints had been replaced once in 1977. The pots themselves had not cracked. Margaret Sutton retired in 1983. Her daughter farmed the property until 1997. The new owners, a family from Chattanooga who raised horses, found the 7 pots along the chicken coop eave and asked the real estate agent what they were for. The agent didn't know. Cyrus Mead stayed on the 44 acres until 1990. He was 77. His son Carl took it over. The rural water line reached that part of Bledsoe County in 1984, and most properties connected. Carl connected in 1986. The collection system stayed in place alongside the county line for 4 more years. Cyrus moved to a small house at the edge of Pikeville in 1990. He was asked once, in 1992, by a woman writing a history column for the county paper, what he had done when the water company cut the creek. He said he'd done the math and found another way. Said the clay held up better than expected. Said the library book helped. Said Dunover deserved most of the credit for the pots. The column ran in October 1992. 4 paragraphs. Page 7. No photograph. Carl Mead retired in 2006. The property sold to a young couple from Nashville planning to grow market vegetables. They found 14 clay pots still seated in the trench along the north barn eave, original pots from Dunover's 1971 kiln, intact. Some joints restored with fresh clay slurry at some point, but the vessels themselves unbroken. The couple didn't know what they were looking at. They asked a neighbor who had farmed on the adjacent property for 22 years. He told them they were old. Said they'd been there as long as he could remember. He didn't know the rest of the story. They left the pots where they were. Cane Branch Creek has not run on the eastern edge of that 44 acres since November of 1971. The Harmon Basin Water Company sold its rights to a regional utility in 1987. That utility was absorbed by a larger authority in 2001. The diversion basin on the far side of Walden's Ridge is still operational. The pots are still in the trench along the barn eave, still there, still usable. Still just clay and rain and 14 pots on a November hillside in Bledsoe County, Tennessee.